What would you do if, on the morning of your wedding, the one thing that proved you were finally chosen, your grandmother's heirloom dress, vanished, stolen by your own sister to marry the man she took from someone else? Would you crumble in silence, or burn everything they built and rise from the ashes? The Vanishing Dress. The morning of my wedding did not begin with champagne toasts, cheerful laughter, or a mother fussing over my hair. It began with silence, thick, suffocating silence, and the sickening sight of an empty dress bag hanging from the back of my childhood bedroom door. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, that I had somehow unzipped the bag in my sleep and forgotten. But no, the bag gaped open, limp and weightless, like a hollow body drained of life. And the truth crashed over me before I could draw my next breath. The dress was gone. I didn't just lose a garment that morning. I lost the one thing that tethered me to hope. My grandmother's wedding dress wasn't fabric and stitching. It was history, rebellion, love that had survived everything the world tried to crush. She had left it to me, not my sister, not anyone else, and for years I had clung to it as proof that someone in this family saw me. That dress was my inheritance, my only first place, and now it was missing. Sitting cross-legged on my pink childhood comforter, polishing her nails with the calm of a queen holding court, was my sister, Natasha. She didn't look at me as I tore the bag from the hanger and held it up, trembling, as though shaking the fabric could summon it back. She didn't flinch at the raw panic in my voice when I whispered, "Where is it?" She smiled without looking up. "You can stop hyperventilating, Kelly. It looks better on me anyway. Marcus deserves a bride who shines." The words didn't make sense at first. They ricocheted through my skull like broken glass. Marcus, her fiancé? No, my stomach twisted. Marcus was supposed to be mine, my fiancé, my groom waiting down the aisle in just a few hours. But Natasha's casual cruelty left no space for confusion. Her wedding was happening today, not mine. And she was wearing the one thing that still belonged to me. Imagine standing barefoot in the ruins of your own life while someone else dances on the ashes. That was me, frozen in my childhood bedroom, staring at the sister who had just stolen the only piece of me I thought was safe. The air seemed thinner, colder, heavier all at once. My mind raced, replaying every dinner table comparison. Every time my mother sighed, "Why can't you be more like Natasha?" Every reminder that I was second, shadow, spare. This was more than theft. It was confirmation. In my family, I had never been the daughter who mattered most. And today, on the one day that was supposed to be mine, Natasha had made sure of it. I wanted to scream, to claw the dress back from her hands, to tear down the facade of perfection she wore like armor. But I stood there, choking on disbelief, because how do you fight when the battlefield is your own blood? "Relax," Natasha drawled, blowing gently across her nails. Marcus and I couldn't wait another month. His grandmother is ill, and the Plaza had a cancellation. It's fate, really. And the dress, it's wasted on you, Kelly. You'll have 30 people in a community center. I'll have 200 at the Plaza. Which wedding do you think Grandma would want remembered? Her words were knives, each one sliding in with a cruel elegance she'd mastered since childhood. The worst part wasn't the theft, or even the betrayal. It was the way she said it, as though my pain was irrelevant, as though my existence was just an inconvenient shadow to her spotlight. And then, footsteps on the stairs. My mother's voice drifting up, sweet and oblivious. She appeared in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, her face glowing with the kind of pride I had prayed for my whole life. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe she would see me. Maybe she would fight for me. But when I pointed to the empty bag, when I managed to choke out, she took it. Natasha took Grandma's dress. I watched my mother's face flicker with something I knew too well: calculation. It was the same expression she wore when deciding which daughter's milestones deserved her presence. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "we could postpone. Give Natasha time. Kelly, sweetheart, this is the Plaza. Marcus's family has flown in. We can reschedule your ceremony." No. The word burst from me like fire. No. I would not postpone. I would not stand aside one more time while my sister claimed everything. But my protest barely registered. Natasha rolled her eyes. My mother urged patience. My voice drowned in their dismissal. And yet, in that suffocating moment, something shifted. My heart was hammering, my throat tight. But beneath the humiliation, beneath the ache of betrayal, a sharper truth cut through. If I let them take this from me, they would take everything. The empty dress bag in my hands was more than fabric missing. It was a mirror, forcing me to confront every compromise I'd made. Every time I'd settled for scraps while my sister feasted. My wedding, my fiancé, my dignity. It had all been built on settling. And the unsettling question whispered in the back of my mind, a hook digging deeper with every second. What if this disaster wasn't the end of me? What if it was the first time I could finally stop being the girl in second place? I didn't know it yet, but losing that dress would unravel my life so violently that morning and rebuild it into something unrecognizable by nightfall. If you think this is the story of a girl robbed on her wedding day, it isn't. This is the story of what happens when the one who's always been overlooked finally refuses to disappear. And if you want to know how far I went to prove that, you'll need to hear the rest. Because what happened after I walked out of that bedroom wasn't just revenge. It was rebirth. Unlikely proposal. I left the house that morning with nothing but the chill of October air biting through my thin pajamas and the echo of my sister's voice rattling in my head. The world outside looked maddeningly ordinary. Neat lawns, tidy cars, neighbors waving as if my life wasn't crumbling inside those walls. Isn't it strange how your own collapse can happen in plain sight while the rest of the world carries on, blind and undisturbed? I sat on the front steps, phone clutched in my hand, and for the first time, I realized I had no idea who I was without that dress, without that wedding, without the fragile illusion that today was going to save me. The text from Derek buzzed across the screen. He was worried about potato salad. Potato salad. His world hadn't shifted, because for him, this wedding had never been about forever. It was about convenience, about the next step. My stomach turned as the words stared back at me. Casual and careless, reminding me of what I had refused to admit. Derek didn't love me, and maybe I didn't love him either. We were both pretending, both settling. How many years had I spent being grateful for crumbs? How many times had I convinced myself that good enough was enough, when deep down I knew I wanted more? That thought terrified me, because if I wasn't the dependable girl marrying her on and off boyfriend at the community center, then who was I? I don't know if you've ever had a day where the ground is ripped from under you, but then, in the emptiness, something unexpected flickers, like a spark. That's exactly what happened when I walked into Bloomingdale's with my best friend Sarah, hours after calling off the wedding. I was still raw, still shaking, but she insisted, you need to see yourself differently. You need to remember you're more than what they told you. And then it happened. A man in an immaculate suit, with eyes far too observant for a stranger, stopped mid-step when he saw me in a green dress I couldn't afford. His gaze wasn't leering, it wasn't polite, it was piercing, as if he saw the whole story etched on my skin. "You look stunning," he said. Simple, but it hit harder than any compliment I'd ever received, because it felt like he meant it. His name was Alexander Hawthorne. Old money polished him, but betrayal had carved something sharper beneath his calm surface. He told me, almost casually, that 6 months earlier he'd been left at the altar. His bride hadn't just abandoned him, she had chosen Marcus Wellington instead. My sister's Marcus. The man Natasha had stolen with the same ease she'd stolen my grandmother's dress. What were the odds? Or was it fate, cruel and calculated, weaving two broken stories together in the wreckage of one day? We sat in a small bistro, the kind of place where laughter floats above wine glasses. And he told me the truth. Not just about Marcus, but about the empire that was already cracking beneath the weight of failed investments. He leaned closer, eyes burning with a dangerous kind of certainty, and asked me the question that would change everything. Why let them win? What if, instead of hiding, you and I wrote a different ending? My heart stopped. Was he serious? Marry him? Today? Walk into Natasha's wedding as his wife, not her discarded sister. The idea was madness, reckless. But haven't you ever felt that tug? The one that says, if you don't leap now, you'll never escape? I could still feel the phantom weight of that empty dress bag in my hands. Natasha had stolen my moment, my chance to be chosen. But Alexander wasn't offering pity. He was offering war. Not the screaming, desperate kind, but the kind fought with elegance, precision, and undeniable power. For once, I wouldn't be the background. I would be the storm walking into their perfect day. I stared at him, searching for cracks in his calm expression, waiting for the joke. But he was serious. Dead serious. And the truth that twisted in my chest was this. I wanted to say yes. Because what do you do when your entire life has been a series of second choices and suddenly someone looks at you and says, "Be first with me"? Ladies and gentlemen, before I tell you what happened when I took Alexander's hand, let me pause here. A warm welcome to you all from Dran. If this story is pulling you in, if you feel the sting of betrayal, the pull of revenge, or the thrill of seeing someone rise from the ashes, then Dran warmly welcomes you to join us. Subscribe to our channel because there are stories coming that you won't want to miss. Stories of heartbreak, resilience, and rebirth. Your support gives us the strength to keep telling them. Now back to that moment. I had two choices: walk away and remain the girl defined by everyone else's expectations, or say yes and risk everything on one reckless leap. My pulse thundered in my ears as I whispered the only word that made sense: yes. In that instant, I wasn't the forgotten sister anymore. I wasn't the girl whose mother told her to settle, whose fiancé treated love like a duty, whose sister stole her inheritance without blinking. I was a woman about to turn the Plaza Hotel upside down. A woman who finally chose herself. And as we left the bistro, Alexander's hand steady on mine, one question roared in my mind, louder than fear, louder than reason. What happens when the overlooked girl decides to fight back? Crash the Plaza. The Plaza Hotel glittered like something out of a dream, but I was not there to dream. I was there to burn. The moment the car door opened, the flash of chandeliers inside the lobby hit me like a spotlight, daring me to step forward. My pulse thundered in my throat as Alexander offered me his arm, steady, unshakable. How many times had I walked behind others, unseen, unnoticed? Not tonight. Tonight, I would be the storm that no one could ignore. The doorman bowed, the concierge smiled, and with a single introduction, Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne, the doors of New York's most exclusive reception opened for us. The announcement carried through the grand terrace room like a gunshot. Conversations halted, glasses froze midair, and heads turned as one. 200 people watched me walk in, not as the forgotten younger sister, but as the woman married to the man my sister had stolen. Do you know the power of silence? The way it thickens when everyone in a room realizes they've just witnessed a scandal? That silence wrapped itself around Natasha's perfect evening like a noose. She stood at the center of the room, radiant in the stolen dress, her smile wide and practiced. For one fraction of a second, she didn't recognize me. Then her eyes widened, her lips parted, and the champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. That sound, fragile, crystalline, final, was the music of her undoing. Kelly? My mother's voice cracked across the room, shock and disapproval mingling in equal measure. What are you doing here? You were supposed to. She stopped, eyes darting to the man at my side. Her gasp was almost inaudible, but I felt it like a blade. Alexander Hawthorne was not just anyone. He was Marcus's rival, the man whose wealth and connections Marcus had tried to crush. And now, he was mine. Marcus's reaction came slower, but when it did, it was devastating. His face drained of color, his composure slipping like ice breaking under weight. He stammered, "Alexander, what is this? Some kind of sick joke?" But Alexander only smiled, the kind of smile that holds daggers behind it. "Not a joke," he said smoothly. "A marriage, a celebration. We thought the Plaza was the perfect venue, considering it was already paid for." Gasps rippled across the room, whispers rising like a tide. Phones appeared in hands, like discreet at first, then brazen. This was no longer just a wedding, it was a spectacle. Natasha found her voice at last, sharp with fury. "You can't be serious. You married her? Her?" She spat the word like it tasted rotten. "This is my day." I lifted my chin, letting the diamonds at my throat catch the light. "Your day? In my grandmother's dress? In a venue booked with someone else's connections? With a groom who abandoned another woman to stand beside you?" "Yes, Natasha, it looks like a fairy tale. But tell me, how much of it actually belongs to you?" Her face reddened, her poise cracking. She glanced at Marcus, but his jaw was tight, his hands clenched. For the first time, she looked unsure. The crowd was no longer neutral. I could see it in their eyes, the thrill of witnessing blood spilled without a drop shed. Some watched with horror, others with glee, all of them waiting for the next strike. Isn't that the cruel truth about society? They crave collapse more than they celebrate love. And collapse was exactly what came next. Alexander stepped forward, his voice carrying the calm menace of a man used to boardrooms and courtrooms. "Marcus, I believe you neglected to mention to your investors that Wellington Industries requires a $15 million injection to survive the quarter. Shall I tell them why that deal will no longer happen?" Marcus's face twisted, panic flickering before he masked it. "This isn't the place." "This is exactly the place," Alexander interrupted. "Your bride chose to make my misfortune her happily ever after. Tonight, we return the favor." The whispers surged louder, fragments of sentences slicing through the air. Bankruptcy, lies, betrayal. Natasha's guests were no longer looking at her with admiration. They were dissecting her downfall before it was complete. My mother clutched at Natasha's arm, whispering urgently, but Natasha shook her off. Her mask crumbled, desperation leaking through. "Kelly, please, don't do this. Don't humiliate me like this." I laughed, soft but sharp. "Humiliate you? Natasha, you humiliated me when you stole my dress, my day, my place in this family. All I'm doing is showing the world the truth you tried to hide." The twist cut deeper when one of Marcus's investors stepped forward, voice dripping with disdain. "Is it true? Did you lie about Hawthorne backing the expansion?" The color drained from Marcus's face. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Questions, accusations, alliances crumbling in real time. And Natasha, once the picture of perfection, stood trembling in a dress that no longer looked like triumph but theft. For the first time, she seemed small. Do you know the moment when power shifts? When the balance tips and the one who's always been silenced finally controls the room? That was my moment. The overlooked sister? The afterthought? The spare? I was none of those things anymore. I turned to Alexander, my voice steady. "Shall we go, Mr. Hawthorne? I think we've made our point." But as we began to walk out, Natasha's voice broke, raw and unguarded. "Kelly, wait, please. Don't leave me like this." For a heartbeat, I almost faltered. Almost. But then I remembered the empty dress bag, the cold dismissal, the way my mother's eyes calculated who mattered more. And I knew, this wasn't cruelty. This was consequence. So I kept walking. And as the doors closed behind us, the sound of chaos still crashing in the ballroom, one thought seared through my mind. How long can a kingdom built on lies survive once the truth is unleashed? When ashes settle. 6 months passed, yet the echo of that night at the Plaza still lingered like a haunting melody. The tabloids had feasted on every second of the scandal, but it wasn't the headlines that struck me most. It was watching the world I'd once envied begin to crumble piece by piece. Marcus Wellington's empire collapsed almost overnight. Investors who once courted his charm now turned on him with lawsuits and accusations. The Long Island estate that had seemed untouchable was sold at auction, portraits and family heirlooms reduced to catalog numbers. The man who once stood beside my sister, as though he owned the future, now faced ruin of a kind money couldn't conceal. And Natasha? Her fairy tale marriage lasted 73 days. The Plaza's white roses had barely wilted before Marcus had walked away, stripping her of status, security, and the illusion that she mattered to him. What does it do to a person when the life they built on, borrowed light, finally burns out? I imagined her staring into mirrors she once adored, seeing not triumph but failure etched into every reflection. But here is where the story twists. Because just when I thought I had walked clear of her shadow, Natasha came back into my life. It was a crisp morning in Manhattan, sunlight spilling across the penthouse that had become my home. Alexander brewed coffee, humming off-key, his domestic clumsiness at odds with the ruthlessness he displayed in boardrooms. For a fleeting moment, everything felt simple. Until the intercom buzzed. "Mrs. Hawthorne," the concierge said, his tone carefully neutral, "there's a Miss Rodriguez here to see you." My blood chilled. Natasha. After months of silence, after all the wreckage, she was standing downstairs. Why now? What did she want? Was it revenge, reconciliation, or something I couldn't yet name? When I opened the door, I hardly recognized her. The woman who had once embodied perfection looked diminished. Her hair, once gleaming, hung limp. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by something off the rack. She carried a garment bag in her arms, the weight of it instantly familiar. My grandmother's dress. Cleaned, pressed, returned. "Hello," she said, voice thin, almost fragile. I let her inside. As she stepped into the penthouse, her eyes darted around the space, taking in the view, the art, the life that was now mine. Envy flickered, but beneath it was something deeper. Fear, regret, maybe even shame. "I brought this," she said, handing me the garment bag. I touched the silk through the plastic, 1,000 memories flooding back. The way I'd imagined walking down the aisle in it, the way she'd ripped it from me without a second thought. "Thank you," I said, but my voice carried no warmth. She sat on the edge of the sofa, fidgeting like a child awaiting judgment. "I came to apologize," she whispered. The words I had dreamed of hearing finally left her lips, yet they didn't soothe me. Instead, they cut open old wounds. "Is that it?" I asked. "Just sorry? After everything?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I know I was cruel, not just with the dress, but for years. I treated you like you were less. I was jealous, Kelly. Jealous of how you could be content with so little. I always needed more, always chasing, and in the end, it destroyed me." For the first time, I saw not my sister, the rival, but my sister, the hollowed-out woman who had built her life on sand. She spoke of Marcus, of the nights filled with fights and suspicions, of the humiliation when he abandoned her as publicly as he had chosen her. Her voice broke when she said, "I thought marrying him would make me untouchable. Instead, it made me disposable." Have you ever listened to an apology and felt your heart torn between compassion and caution? Part of me wanted to gather her in my arms to tell her we could start again. But another part of me remembered the countless times I had forgiven, excused, diminished myself just to keep the peace. Could I trust her now? Or was this just another performance in her endless theater of survival? Alexander appeared briefly in the doorway, a silent question in his eyes. I shook my head. This was mine to face. Natasha looked at him with a flicker of bitterness before turning back to me. "Do you love him?" she asked suddenly. The question startled me. Did I love Alexander? Or were we just partners in revenge, bound by mutual hurt? My heart raced as I realized the truth. Somewhere between the chaos and the healing, respect had grown into something sturdier, quieter, but undeniably real. "I'm learning to," I admitted. "And it's different this time. It's not about settling or proving anything. It's about building something honest." Her shoulders slumped, her bravado gone. "I envy you," she said softly. "Even now, I ruined your wedding, and still you found something I never had." I wanted to answer, but words failed me. Because wasn't that the cruel irony? That in stealing what was mine, she had pushed me toward the life I truly deserved. And here, let me pause to ask something of you, the one listening to this story. If you've felt the weight of betrayal, if you've seen how unexpected turns can lead to hidden blessings, then you understand what I mean. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. It may seem like a small action, but for us, it's a huge encouragement that fuels our passion to bring you even more captivating real-life stories. Natasha stood to leave, and for the first time, she looked smaller than me, not in height or presence, but in spirit. At the door, she hesitated. "Do you think there's any chance we could start over?" I studied her carefully. The old me would have leapt at the chance, desperate for scraps of sisterhood. But the woman standing here now knew the difference between forgiveness and surrender. "Maybe," I said slowly, "but it has to be different. No more shadows, no more competition. If we're sisters again, it will be as equals." Her lips trembled into something resembling a smile. "I'll try." When the door closed behind her, I felt not victory, not vindication, but peace. The kind that comes when you no longer need someone else's approval to know your worth. And yet, as I returned to the window, watching the city glitter beneath me, a strange unease lingered. Because if Natasha had fallen this far, what else might she be capable of doing to climb back? Was this truly the end of our war, or just another fragile truce waiting to break? That uncertainty hung in the air like a storm cloud, proof that even after triumph, the heart still beats faster in the silence that follows. A real wedding. 6 months later, the Aegean sunset bathed the horizon in hues of rose and gold, and I stood barefoot on the warm sand of Santorini, the hem of my dress whispering against the tide. The air was heavy with salt and promise, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't measuring myself against someone else's reflection. I was simply here, present, whole. The ceremony was small, intimate, nothing like the grand spectacle my sister had once orchestrated, and yet infinitely more real. Friends who had become family stood barefoot in the sand, their faces glowing with joy instead of judgment. My grandmother's dress was folded safely away at home. This time, I had chosen my own gown. Simple, elegant mine. And as Alexander's eyes locked on mine while we exchanged vows, I realized I wasn't fighting to prove anything anymore. I was choosing. There is a profound silence that follows the words, I do. It isn't empty. It's full. Full of years of mistakes, of forgiveness, of lessons finally learned. When Alexander slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt not just the weight of gold, but the weight of every step that had brought me here. The betrayal, the humiliation, the firestorm of the Plaza Hotel, it had all carved away the girl who thought she needed to settle. What remained was a woman who knew her worth, who had found someone who saw it too. Later, as music drifted across the beach and laughter carried into the night, I caught myself standing apart from the crowd, gazing at the stars scattered above us like diamonds on velvet. I thought of Natasha then. She had sent roses, white, understated, almost apologetic, with a note that read, "Congratulations on your real wedding. Love, your sister." For years, I would have clung to those words as if they were a lifeline, desperate for any sign of her affection. But now, I simply smiled. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It frees you from carrying it. Have you ever felt that shift? The moment you realize the life you're living no longer belongs to anyone else's script? That night, as I danced barefoot in the sand, I knew I was finally living mine. And maybe that's what life does. It breaks us where we are weakest. And then, if we're brave enough, it gives us the chance to rebuild stronger, truer, unashamed of the scars. My worst day, watching my sister steal my dress, my wedding, my dignity, had birthed the best decision I ever made. Not just marrying Alexander, but marrying the version of myself that refused to be overlooked again. If you're listening to this, perhaps you felt what I once felt, that you were always second, always the one who tries hard but never shines. Perhaps you've carried the sting of betrayal or the suffocating weight of being underestimated. Hear me now. You are not defined by what was taken from you. You are defined by what you choose to build after. I had spent years settling for scraps. Scraps of love, scraps of recognition, scraps of belonging. But scraps don't feed the soul. You deserve the feast. You deserve to be chosen, not as an afterthought, not as a compromise, but as the first choice, the only choice. And so when Alexander drew me into his arms on that beach, the waves lapping at our feet, I whispered something I had never dared to say out loud before. I deserve this. Not him, not the dress, not the island, but the feeling of being seen, cherished, valued. The feeling of finally stepping into a life that was mine to claim. The night ended not with fireworks or grandeur, but with something far more precious. A quiet certainty, the kind that hums in your bones, steady and unshakable. We would face storms, yes. We would face questions, doubts, maybe even failures. But we would face them together as equals. Not out of revenge, not out of desperation, out of choice. And perhaps that is the truest revenge of all. Not in watching others fall, but in rising so high that their opinions no longer matter. Not in destroying their world, but in creating one so luminous that it renders theirs irrelevant. So let me leave you with this. Sometimes, the worst betrayal can ignite the brightest beginning. Sometimes, losing everything is the only way to discover what you were worth all along. And sometimes the perfect revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so beautiful that no one can steal it from you. As the music slowed and Alexander pressed a kiss to my forehead, I closed my eyes and let the waves carry away the last remnants of the girl who had once begged to be seen. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned that her worth was never in the dress, or the wedding, or the approval of others. It was in her choice to stand tall, even when the world tried to make her small. And that choice, my friends, is one you can make too. Life rarely unfolds in the neat, polished way we imagine. For Kelly, what began as the most humiliating day of her life, the theft of her wedding dress and the collapse of her carefully constructed future, became the very catalyst that led her to freedom, growth, and a love built not on compromise, but on choice. Her story reminds us that sometimes the things we cling to most desperately, whether a relationship, a family's approval, or a dream that no longer fits, must shatter so that we can discover something better waiting on the other side. The unraveling of her old life didn't mark the end, but the beginning. By losing what she thought defined her, she was forced to confront what truly mattered, her self-worth. This journey wasn't about revenge. Not really. The Plaza Hotel confrontation, the downfall of Natasha and Marcus, those were loud, dramatic moments. But the quiet triumph came later, on a Santorini beach, in the choice to begin anew, to live without apology or fear. That is the lesson we must hold on to. The greatest victory isn't in proving others wrong, but in proving ourselves right. The satisfaction isn't in tearing down those who doubted us, but in rising so far beyond them that their opinions no longer cast shadows over our lives. What can you take from this? That betrayal, heartbreak, or failure isn't a verdict. It's an invitation. An invitation to stop settling, to stop living in the reflection of someone else's success. To ask yourself, what life would I choose if I stopped being afraid of being seen? The answer may not come overnight, but it starts with the courage to walk away from good enough and toward more than enough. It begins with reclaiming your voice, your worth, your power. So as you reflect on Kelly's story, consider this. What is your wedding dress? The thing you think you cannot lose. And if it were taken tomorrow, would it destroy you or free you to discover who you could become without it? If this story spoke to you, if it stirred something in you, I invite you to join the Dran community where stories like this continue to unfold. Stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us that even the darkest betrayals can lead to the brightest beginnings. And if you want to see more of these powerful journeys, please subscribe to the channel. It may seem like a small action, but for us, it's the fuel that keeps us creating, sharing, and bringing you the stories that matter most.